What would you do if the most distant visitor to our solar system suddenly stopped behaving like a comet? Imagine this. It's October 28th, 2025. You're monitoring deep space telemetry when the object astronomers have been tracking since July, Comet 3I AT Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar visitor, begins transmitting structured signals, not random cosmic noise, patterns, mathematics, intent. This 33 billion-ton wanderer, larger than most asteroids, has been behaving normally for months, outgassing CO2 and water vapor as expected, its massive coma stretching 26,400 kilometers across space like a green glowing shroud. Scientists explain the unusual emerald luminescence as excited nickel atoms, perfectly natural. But now, as 3I Atlas passes within 1.4 astronomical units of our Sun, closer than the orbit of Mars, something fundamental changes. The outgassing patterns shift from chaotic to organized. The coma begins to contract and reshape, and deep space monitoring stations across Earth start receiving transmissions that follow no known natural phenomenon. What would you do when you realize that humanity's most advanced telescopes have been watching not a comet, but a dormant vessel? When the green glow isn't excited nickel, but something far more purposeful awakening after eons of interstellar drift. What would you do in the first 72 hours as governments scramble to understand what's happening, as communication networks begin failing in sequence, as the skies above Europe start filling with objects that definitely aren't meteorites? This is the story of those first 3 days. The story of Dr. Sarah Ken, a NASA flight systems engineer who becomes the bridge between scientific understanding and military necessity. The story of how humanity discovered it was not alone, and that first contact would not be on our terms. Chapter 1. Signal Acquisition. The Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California, hummed with the constant white noise of cosmic surveillance when Dr. Sarah Chen first noticed the anomaly. October 28, 2025, 14:32 GMT. She'd been reviewing telemetry from 3I/Atlas for the past 6 months, ever since the Chilean Atlas survey had flagged the object as humanity's third confirmed interstellar visitor. Chen leaned forward in her workstation chair, adjusting her horn-rimmed glasses as she studied the spectroscopic data flowing across her monitors. The comet should have been approaching its closest point to the Sun, perihelion, in 2 days. Everything about its behavior had been textbook until this moment. The CO2 outgassing rate had spiked to 847 kilograms per second. 12 minutes ago, it had been a steady 129 kilograms per second. "Martinez," she called to her colleague across the mission operations floor, "are you seeing this volatility increase from Atlas?" Flight Director Carlos Martinez looked up from his console, his weathered face creased with the permanent concern lines of someone who'd shepherded dozens of interplanetary missions. "Define volatility." "6-fold increase in outgassing, but the spectra—" Jen paused, cross-referencing her data with the Hubble observations. "The spectra don't match natural sublimation patterns." The comet's nucleus, estimated at 3.2 kilometers in diameter, should have been shedding material in predictable jets as solar radiation heated its ice and frozen gases. Instead, the emissions appeared to be coming from discrete points arranged in geometric patterns across its surface. Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up orbital mechanics projections. 3I/Atlas had been traveling at 58 kilometers per second when it entered our solar system 3 months ago, its hyperbolic trajectory indicating it had originated from deep interstellar space, somewhere beyond the influence of our sun, possibly from another star system entirely. "Sarah," Martinez's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "Come look at this." She rolled her chair over to his workstation, where he had isolated the radio frequency spectrum from our deep space antenna array. What she saw made her stomach drop. The background cosmic microwave radiation showed artificial peaks, structured, repeating, mathematical progressions that followed no known astrophysical processes. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "Started 17 minutes ago, same time as your outgassing spike." Chen stared at the waveform scrolling across Martinez's screen. Prime number sequences, binary progressions, the mathematical signature of intelligence. Her secure phone buzzed. The caller ID showed USSF Spacecom, United States Space Force Space Operations Command. "Dr. Chen, this is Colonel Rodriguez, Strategic Communications Division. We need you in a classified briefing in 30 minutes, secure room 7. "Colonel, I'm monitoring a potential. We know about the Atlas anomaly. We've been monitoring it for the past 23 minutes. This briefing is mandatory, Dr. Chen. Bring your preliminary data." The line went dead. Martinez was watching her face. What did they say? They'd already know. Chen looked back at her screens where the impossible data continued streaming in from a comet that no longer behaved like a comet. Across the operations floor, other technicians were beginning to notice the anomalies appearing in their data streams. Conversations grew hushed. Phone calls were made to supervisors. The normal rhythms of deep space monitoring shifted into something more urgent. Chen gathered her preliminary analysis files, her hands moving automatically through procedures while her mind raced through implications. If 3I/Atlas was transmitting structured signals, if its physical behavior had shifted from natural to controlled, then everything they thought they knew about this interstellar visitor was wrong. She thought about the comet's massive size, 33 billion tons of unknown composition hurtling through space with the kinetic energy of humanity's largest nuclear arsenals. If this wasn't a comet... Her secure email chimed. European Space Agency Deep Space Tracking, Madrid. Urgent. Atlas telemetry confirms artificial signal structure. Multiple DSN sites reporting coordinated transmission patterns. Request immediate data sharing protocol. Similar messages were arriving from radio telescopes in Australia, Chile, and Puerto Rico. The global deep space monitoring network was lighting up with confirmations of what Chen was seeing in Goldstone. 3I/Atlas was no longer a comet. It was something else entirely. And in less than 48 hours, it would reach the closest point of its trajectory to Earth's orbital path. Chen locked her workstation and headed towards the classified briefing room, carrying data that she suspected would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Behind her, the telemetry continued streaming in from deep space, carrying mathematical messages from something that traveled between stars to reach our solar system, something that was now announcing its presence with the precise language of intelligence. The transformation of 3I/Atlas had begun. Chapter 2. Classified Protocols. Secure Room 7 at the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex was a windowless chamber lined with copper mesh and acoustic dampening foam. Dr. Sarah Chen had been in classified briefings before: budget reviews, mission security protocols, foreign technology assessments, but never one that felt this urgent. Colonel Rodriguez sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by officials Chen didn't recognize. A woman in civilian clothes with the bearing of intelligence services. A man in Space Force dress blues with insignia indicating strategic operations. On the wall-mounted screens, real-time telemetry continued streaming from deep space monitoring stations around the globe. "Dr. Chen, thank you for joining us." Colonel Rodriguez gestured to an empty chair. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss and very little time." Chen settled into her seat, her laptop containing the Atlas data feeling suddenly heavy. Through the secure video link, she could see similar briefing rooms at the European Space Agency's center in Madrid and the Australian Deep Space Communications Complex in Canberra. The global deep space network was coordinating something she'd never seen before. "What you observed at 14:32 GMT today has been confirmed by all 3 DSN complexes, as well as independent radio telescopes in Chile, Puerto Rico, and the Netherlands. 3I-Atlas has ceased natural outgassing behavior and begun transmitting structured electromagnetic signals." The intelligence analyst leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, in your assessment, what are we looking at? Best case and worst case scenarios." Chen opened her laptop, pulling up the spectroscopic analysis. "Best case, we're witnessing an unprecedented natural phenomenon, some kind of resonance effect between solar radiation and the comet's unusual composition, creating patterns that mimic artificial signals." She paused, studying the data scrolling across the screens. "Worst case, 3I-Atlas isn't a comet. It's something that's been dormant during its journey between star systems, and proximity to our sun has activated it." The Space Force officer spoke for the first time. "Explain the activation theory." "The object is primarily CO2 ice mixed with complex hydrocarbons and metallic elements. If there were components embedded within that matrix, solar heating could trigger their emergence. The outgassing patterns we're seeing suggest controlled venting from specific coordinates across the surface." Colonel Rodriguez nodded grimly. "At 15:47 GMT, 33 minutes ago, radio telescopes in Chile detected structured pulse sequences from Atlas that matched no known astronomical phenomena. The signals appear to be directional, aimed at our solar system's inner planets." Chen felt her stomach tighten. "Directional how?" "Focused beam transmissions, not omnidirectional broadcasts you'd expect from natural processes." The colonel activated another screen showing orbital mechanics projections. "More concerning is the object's trajectory analysis. Initial calculations showed it would pass through the inner solar system and continue into interstellar space. Recent measurements suggest course corrections." The trajectory plot showed 3I-Atlas's path, curving more sharply than gravitational forces alone could explain. Small changes, but enough to alter its closest approach to Earth from 1.2 astronomical units to 0.8 AU. "It's slowing down," Chen whispered, "and changing course." The intelligence analyst pulled up classified satellite imagery. 37 minutes ago, the James Webb Space Telescope captured this. The image showed 3I-Atlas in unprecedented detail. The familiar fuzzy coma of a comet was there, but within it, geometric structures were becoming visible. Angular formations that looked disturbingly artificial, emerging from what should have been a simple ball of ice and rock. Chen leaned closer to the screen. "Those surface features, They're not crater impacts or natural formations. They're opening. Into what, Dr. Chen? She studied the thermal imaging data flowing in from multiple space telescopes. Into chambers, internal cavities, like it's hollow. The room fell silent except for the constant hum of electronics and the soft beeping of incoming data streams. On the screens, 3i Atlas continued its impossible transformation, shedding its disguise as humanity watched in real time. Colonel Rodriguez broke the silence. Dr. Chen, based on your analysis of deep space tracking and orbital mechanics, how long do we have before this object reaches optimal position relative to Earth? Chen ran rapid calculations on her laptop, cross-referencing the trajectory changes with current solar system positions. If it continues the observed course corrections, 47 hours until closest approach. But, Colonel, if it can alter its trajectory this significantly, it could potentially achieve Earth orbit, if that's its intention. The Space Force officer was already reaching for his secure phone. I need to brief Northcom immediately. We're looking at a potential threat of unknown capabilities approaching Earth in less than 2 days. Through the secure video link, she could see similar conversations beginning in Madrid and Canberra. The global space monitoring network was shifting from scientific observation to strategic assessment. Dr. Chen, we're establishing a joint task force to monitor and assess this situation. Your expertise in deep space systems and orbital mechanics make you essential to this effort. Are you willing to serve as our primary technical consultant for the duration of this event? Chen looked at the screens showing impossible data from an object that had traveled between stars to reach their solar system, an object that was now revealing itself to be something far more complex than anyone had imagined. Yes, she said, but I need full access to all observational data from every monitoring station. If we're going to understand what we're dealing with, I need complete transparency. Granted. Colonel Rodriguez stood. Dr. Chen, as of this moment, you have priority alpha clearance for all aspects of what we're designating Operation Atlas Watch. Your recommendations will go directly to the highest levels of government and military command. As the briefing concluded and participants began coordinating with their respective agencies, Chen remained at the conference table, studying the continuing stream of data from 3i Atlas. The comet that wasn't a comet was still 0.8 astronomical units away, roughly the distance from Earth to Venus, but already its transformation was visible to humanity's most powerful telescopes. She thought about the 33 billion tons of unknown material approaching their world, about the structured signals and course corrections that defied natural explanation, about the geometric patterns emerging from what should have been pristine interstellar ice. In less than 47 hours, they would know what 3i Atlas truly was. And Chen suspected that knowledge would change everything about humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Outside the secure briefing room, normal operations continued at the Deep Space Network facility. But inside, a small group of officials was beginning to prepare for first contact with something that had journeyed between the stars, something that was no longer hiding its true nature. The metamorphosis of 3i Atlas was accelerating. Chapter 3. Structural Emergence. The Secure Operations Center at Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado Springs had been transformed into something resembling mission control for humanity's first contact scenario. Banks of monitors displayed feeds from observatories around the globe, while secure communication links connected military commanders with space agencies, intelligence services, and research institutions worldwide. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a wall-sized display showing the latest images from the James Webb Space Telescope, her presentation remote trembling slightly in her hand. 36 hours had passed since the first structured signals from 3I/Atlas. The object was now clearly visible to ground-based telescopes as something far more complex than any natural comet. The surface transformations are accelerating, Chen reported to the assembled Joint Task Force. What we initially interpreted as outgassing vents are revealed to be apertures, geometric openings arranged in patterns that suggest internal compartmentalization. General Hayes, Northcom commander, leaned forward in her chair. Compartmentalization implies purpose, Dr. Chen. Are we looking at a vessel? She clicked to the next slide, showing thermal imaging data. The internal heat signatures support that assessment. Temperature gradients indicate hollow chambers, possibly pressurized, with what appears to be active heating systems. No natural comet would maintain internal temperatures above absolute zero while this far from any star. The intelligence briefing officer, identified only as Agent Morrison, spoke up. What about the signal patterns? Any progress on decryption? The transmissions have evolved beyond simple mathematical progressions. Chen pulled up spectrographic analysis. 12 hours ago, we detected what can only be described as diagnostic sequences, like a systems check being broadcast across multiple frequencies. She paused, studying the data that still seemed impossible despite hours of verification. But there's something else. The signals aren't just coming from Atlas anymore. The room tensed. General Hayes set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Explain. Deep space monitoring stations have identified response signals, faint but structured, coming from various locations throughout the outer solar system. Chen clicked to a solar system map showing signal origins. Whatever's inside Atlas appears to be communicating with other objects. Objects we hadn't detected because they weren't broadcasting. Agent Morrison was already typing on his secure tablet. How many other objects? At least 17 confirmed sources, positioned throughout the asteroid belt, near Jupiter's Lagrange points, and in the Kuiper belt. They've been silent until Atlas began its awakening sequence. The implications settled over the room like a heavy shroud. 17 unknown objects, positioned strategically throughout the solar system, now responding to signals from what they'd thought was an approaching comet. General Hayes activated her secure phone. I need immediate priority communication with the President's Science Advisor and the Secretary of Defense. We're no longer dealing with a single anomalous object. Through the wall-mounted screens, real-time imagery from Atlas continued streaming. The object's coma had largely dissipated, revealing a complex geometric structure approximately 3.2 kilometers in diameter. Surface features that looked disturbingly technological. Arrays that might be sensors or communication equipment, what could only be described as docking ports. Colonel Rodriguez, attending via secure video link from Goldstone, interrupted the murmured conversations. Dr. Chen, we're detecting new activity. Atlas is beginning to unfold. All attention turned to the main screen as fresh imagery appeared from the Hubble Space Telescope. The object's surface was opening along seam lines invisible until this moment. Panels sliding back to reveal internal structures, what looked like launching bays. Chen felt her mouth go dry. It's not just a vessel. It's a carrier. The thermal imaging showed internal chambers coming online, heating systems activating, what appeared to be smaller craft being prepared for deployment. After traveling between star systems disguised as a comet, 3I/Atlas was revealing its true purpose as humanity watched in real time. Dr. Chen, General Hayes's voice cut through the stunned silence. In your professional assessment, how long before whatever's inside that thing begins active operations? Chen ran calculations based on the activation sequences they'd observed. The diagnostic signals suggest systematic awakening of dormant systems. If this follows the pattern we've seen, 6 to 8 hours before full operational capability. And closest approach to Earth, 11 hours, 37 minutes. General Hayes stood up, her decision made. Dr. Chen, I'm placing you on my immediate staff as Senior Technical Advisor. We need your expertise as close to command authority as possible. She turned to the assembled officers. Gentlemen, ladies, we are now operating under DEFCON 2. All military assets worldwide are to be placed on high alert. Whatever is coming out of that thing, we need to be ready. As the briefing dissolved into urgent coordination calls and strategic planning sessions, Chen remained focused on the continuing data streams from Atlas. The object was transforming before their eyes, shedding its disguise like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. But instead of something beautiful, humanity was witnessing the emergence of something that had crossed the vast emptiness between stars for purposes they couldn't yet comprehend. On the main screen, the first small objects began separating from Atlas's hull, dark shapes moving with purposeful trajectories toward the inner solar system, toward Earth. The invasion had begun.
Chapter 4. First Contact Protocol. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council convened at 0347 GMT on October 29, 2025, as reports flooded in from observatories worldwide. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the Technical Advisors section, her laptop displaying real-time telemetry that painted an increasingly dire picture of humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Secretary General Maria Santos called the session to order with unprecedented urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered to address what may be the most significant event in human history. Dr. Chen, please brief the Council on the current situation. Chen stood, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was about to report. As of 3:30 GMT, we have confirmed the deployment of 347 discrete objects from the carrier vessel designated 3I/Atlas. These objects range in size from approximately 50 meters to 2 kilometers in diameter and are following controlled trajectories toward Earth. The Russian representative leaned forward. Dr. Chen, what is their estimated time of arrival? The lead elements will reach Earth's atmosphere in approximately 14 hours. However, we are detecting course adjustments that suggest these aren't simple ballistic trajectories. The objects appear capable of power flight and orbital insertion. On the chamber's main screens, tracking data showed the approaching fleet as red dots against a blue representation of Earth's orbital space. Each dot represented an unknown technology with capabilities that exceeded anything in humanity's arsenal. Chinese Ambassador Wu raised her hand. What attempts had been made to communication? Chen pulled up a new display showing radio transmission logs. All major space agencies have attempted contact using mathematical progressions, prime number sequences, and basic pictographs broadcast on multiple frequencies. So far, we have received no direct response to our overtures. No response to our communication attempts. However, the objects continue broadcasting among themselves using structured signals we cannot decrypt. They appear to be coordinating their approach to Earth using sophisticated command and control protocols. Secretary General Santos stood, her face grave. Dr. Chen, in your professional assessment, what are our options? Chen had dreaded this question, knowing her answer would influence decisions affecting billions of people. Madam Secretary General, based on the object's demonstrated capabilities, controlled flight, course corrections, and parent coordination, any military response would likely be ineffective. These craft have traveled between star systems. Their technology appears centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of our own. The American representative spoke up. Are you recommending we simply wait and see what they want? I'm recommending we prepare for multiple scenarios while continuing diplomatic overtures. The objects haven't demonstrated hostile intent. Their course vectors suggest orbital insertion rather than direct surface impact. This could be reconnaissance rather than invasion. Agent Morrison, attending via secure video link from Peterson Space Force Base, interrupted with an urgent update. Dr. Chen, we're detecting new activity from the 17 objects positioned throughout the outer solar system. They're beginning to move toward the inner planets. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. What they'd thought was a single carrier vessel was revealed to be part of a much larger operation. 17 additional objects, each potentially as massive as 3I/Atlas, were converging on the inner solar system. Secretary General Santos called for order as representatives began urgent consultations with their capitals. Dr. Chen, how many total objects are we now tracking? Chen's fingers flew across her laptop, compiling data from global tracking networks, including the newly mobile outer system objects and the 347 craft already deployed from Atlas. We're looking at approximately 364 discrete threats of unknown capability approaching Earth. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Even if each object carried only minimal armament, the sheer mass represented kinetic energy equivalent to humanity's entire nuclear arsenal. The French representative stood. What do we know about the technology being employed? The propulsion systems appear to operate without visible reaction mass, no exhaust signatures detectable by our instruments. The craft are maintaining formation while executing complex trajectory changes that would require enormous fuel expenditure using conventional rockets. This suggests either highly efficient fusion drives or some form of reactionless propulsion. Impossible, according to known physics. Yes, sir, which suggests our understanding of physics is incomplete. These craft are operating according to principles we haven't discovered. Secretary General Santos called for a brief recess as representatives coordinated with their governments. Chen remained at her station, monitoring the continuing stream of data from tracking stations worldwide. The approaching fleet maintained perfect formation while executing course corrections that demonstrated technological capabilities beyond human comprehension. Her secure phone buzzed with a priority message from Peterson Space Force Base. Urgent. First atmospheric entry detected. Single craft descending over European continent. Estimated landing zone, central Germany. Chen felt her blood turn cold. The reconnaissance phase was ending. Whatever intelligence controlled the fleet was ready for direct contact with humanity. As the Security Council reconvened, she realized that humanity's response to first contact would be decided not by careful diplomatic protocol, but by whatever happened when an alien craft touched down on German soil in less than 12 hours. The age of human isolation in the universe was ending. Whether the next age would be one of cooperation or conquest remained to be seen. On her laptop screen, the red dots continued their inexorable approach to Earth, carrying with them the future of human civilization.
Chapter 5. Atmospheric Entry. The European Space Agency's Mission Control Center in Darmstadt, Germany, had become the focal point for humanity's first direct encounter with extraterrestrial technology. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a wall of monitors displaying radar tracks, atmospheric entry trajectories, and real-time video feeds from military aircraft shadowing the descending craft. "Contact is maintaining controlled descent through the thermosphere," reported Luftwaffe Colonel Klaus Weber, coordinating air defense operations. "No heat signature consistent with atmospheric friction. The object appears to be using some form of energy dissipation we don't understand." Chen studied the telemetry data streaming from multiple radar installations across Central Europe. The craft, a sleek geometric structure approximately 200 meters in length, was descending through Earth's atmosphere without following any physics she recognized. No glowing re-entry plasma, no sonic boom, just a controlled, silent approach to the surface. "Estimated landing coordinates?" asked Dr. Kalena Vasquez, ESA's Director of Operations. "The Black Forest region, approximately 30 kilometers southwest of Stuttgart," Colonel Weber replied. "We've established a perimeter at 15 kilometers and are evacuating civilian populations from the immediate area." Through secure video links, Chen could see similar scenes playing out at command centers worldwide. The other 346 craft from the Atlas carrier remained in holding patterns at various altitudes above Earth, while the 17 massive objects from the outer solar system continued their approach to the inner planets. But all attention focused on this single craft, making humanity's first confirmed alien landing. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Vasquez turned to her. "What should we expect when it lands?" Chen pulled up comparative analyses from the past 36 hours of observation. "Based on the structured signals we detected, the craft likely carries some form of intelligence, possibly biological, possibly artificial. The fact that it's landing rather than remaining in orbit suggests an intention to interact with our surface environment." Her secure tablet chimed with an urgent message from SETI Institute in California. "Breakthrough. Partial signal decryption achieved. First translated constructs. Assessment. Compatibility. Integration. Full analysis attached." Chen's hands trembled slightly as she opened the attachment. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity had managed to decode fragments of the alien communications. The concepts were disturbing in their implications. "Colonel Weber," Chen called out, "I need to speak with you privately." They stepped into a secure briefing room adjacent to the main operations floor, and Chen showed him the SETI analysis on her tablet. "Assessment and compatibility suggest they're evaluating us for some purpose, but integration implies they intend to integrate us into something larger. This might not be first contact. It might be recruitment." Colonel Weber's face darkened. "Recruitment for what?" "Unknown, but combined with the fleet composition, a carrier vessel deploying smaller craft, while larger objects take strategic positions throughout the solar system. This looks like the opening phase of a systematic operation." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent calls from the main operations floor. The descending craft had reached the lower atmosphere and was beginning final approach to the forest landing site. All stations, contact is descending through 2,000 meters altitude. Speed has reduced to 40 kilometers per hour. Landing appears imminent. Jen and Colonel Weber returned to the main floor, where live video feeds from military drones showed the craft settling silently into a clearing among the dense juniper pine trees. No landing thrusters, no dust clouds. The object simply came to rest on the forest floor, as if gravity had been temporarily suspended. "Contact has landed," reported the drone operator. "No visible activity, no energy emissions detected." For long minutes, nothing happened. The craft sat motionless among the trees, while military forces maintained their perimeter, and global audiences watched via streaming video feeds that governments could no longer contain or control. Then, with no warning, sections of the craft's hull began to fold outward like flower petals opening. Internal spaces became visible, bathed in a soft, blue-white light that seemed to emanate from the craft's structure itself. "Movement inside the craft," reported the drone operator. "Multiple contacts. They're not human." The video feed showed figures emerging from the landed craft. Tall, slender beings in form-fitting suits that seemed to merge seamlessly with their physiology. But as Chen studied the imagery more closely, she realized something was wrong with her initial assessment. "Colonel Labor, can you enhance the video resolution on Contact 1? The enhanced imagery has revealed disturbing details. The figures weren't wearing suits. The metallic, segmented appearance was their skin. Portions of their anatomy appeared organic, while others were clearly technological. Limbs that moved with mechanical precision, faces that showed disturbingly human features partially obscured by technological augmentation." "My God," Colonel Weber whispered, "they're cyborgs." "Not cyborgs," Jen corrected, her voice barely audible. "They're converts, or were human." The implications crashed over the operations center like a tidal wave. The beings emerging from the craft weren't purely alien. They showed signs of human origin, transformed by technology into something that served the intelligence behind the invasion. As they watched in growing horror, more figures emerged from the craft. Some retained more human characteristics than others, suggesting a hierarchy of conversion or different stages of the transformation process. All moved with purposeful coordination, beginning to establish what looked like a perimeter around their landing site. "Dr. Jen," Dr. Vasquez's voice carried barely controlled panic. "If those are converted humans, where did they come from?" Chen thought about the long journey between star systems, about civilizations that might have encountered this intelligence before Earth, about species that had faced the choice between conversion and extinction. Previous worlds, previous species that were assessed and found compatible for integration. On the video feeds, the converted beings continued their methodical establishment of the landing site. Humanity was witnessing not first contact, but a preview of what they might become if the assessment determined them suitable for transformation. The invasion wasn't about conquest. It was about recruitment. And the recruits weren't volunteers.
The converted beings moved with mechanical precision through the German forest, their partially human faces expressionless as they established what could only be described as a processing center. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the live feeds from Peterson Space Force Base, her stomach churning as the true purpose of the landing became clear.
"They're setting up infrastructure," she reported to the emergency command staff. "Not weapons emplacements or defensive positions. Those structures they're assembling, they look like medical facilities." General Hayes leaned closer to the main display.
Medical facilities for what purpose, Dr. Chen?
Chen highlighted sections of the video feed where the converted beings were assembling modular structures with transparent chambers, complex arrays of what appeared to be scanning equipment, and networked processing units that hummed with alien energy. Assessment and integration facilities. They're preparing to process human subjects. Colonel Weber's voice crackled through the secure communication link from the German perimeter. "Dr. Chen, we're detecting localized electromagnetic interference around the landing site. Our communications are being selectively jammed. They're creating a suppression field." The implications hit the command center like a physical blow. The aliens weren't just establishing a beachhead. They were creating a zone where human technology would be neutralized, where resistance would be impossible. "Sir," called out communications specialist Martinez from his station, "we're losing contact with civilian populations in a widening radius around the landing site. Cell towers, internet infrastructure, even radio communications are going dark in sequence." Chen pulled up a map of Central Europe, showing the expanding electromagnetic dead zone. The suppression field was growing at approximately 2 kilometers per hour, creating an ever-widening area where human civilization was being systematically isolated from its technological foundation. "General Hayes," Chen realized, "they're not trying to destroy our infrastructure. They're trying to contain it, create zones where they control all communication and technology." Through the drone feeds, they watched as the converted beings completed their initial setup and began what appeared to be a systematic survey of the surrounding area. Teams of 3 moved through the forest in precise search patterns, carrying devices that scanned the ground, the trees, even the air itself. "What are they looking for?" General Hayes asked. "Biological samples, probably. They need to understand local ecosystems, human physiology, genetic compatibility." Chen felt sick saying the words. "They're conducting a comprehensive assessment of what they're working with." Agent Morrison joined the conversation via secure video link. "Dr. Chen, we've received disturbing reports from our European contacts. Local populations near the suppression field are reporting mass behavioral changes. People are abandoning their homes and walking toward the landing site." The room fell silent, except for the constant hum of electronics and the soft murmur of ongoing communications with field units. On the main screen, thermal imaging showed human heat signatures moving through the forest, not fleeing from the alien presence, but approaching it. "How many people?" asked Jen. "Initial estimates suggest several hundred from surrounding villages and towns. They're moving in organized groups, almost like they're being summoned." Colonel Weber's voice carried increasing urgency. "Perimeter teams report civilians walking past our positions. They're not responding to verbal commands or physical barriers. They just walk around us and continue toward the landing site." Chen studied the thermal patterns showing the convergence of human populations on the alien processing center. "It's not summoning, it's selection. They're using some form of biological or neurological influence to identify the most compatible subjects." As they watched in growing horror, the first human subjects entered the processing chambers. Men, women, children of various ages walking calmly toward the transparent chambers where the converted beings waited with scanning equipment and preparation protocols. "My God!" General Hayes whispered. "They're volunteering." "They're not volunteering," Chen corrected. "They're being compelled, probably through electromagnetic influence on brain chemistry or subliminal psychoacoustic signals. The aliens are using selective neurological manipulation to identify the most compatible subjects." As they watched in growing horror, the first human subjects began their transformation, not violent or traumatic, but methodical. Technological integration that merged alien systems with human biology while preserving enough of the original personality to maintain functionality. The converted beings weren't just soldiers or slaves. They were proof of concept, evidence that human physiology could be successfully adapted to serve whatever intelligence controlled the fleet approaching Earth. As night fell over the German forest, the Alien Processing Center expanded its operations. More civilians arrived, more assessment chambers activated. More human beings began the irreversible process of conversion to serve masters who traveled between stars to claim them. The age of human independence was ending, one volunteer at a time.
Chapter 7. Global Suppression. The emergency session of world leaders convened via secure satellite links as electromagnetic suppression fields expanded around alien processing centers on every continent. Dr. Sarah Chen briefed the assembled presidents, prime ministers, and military commanders from Peterson Space Force Base, her voice steady despite the catastrophic scope of what she was reporting. "We now have confirmed processing centers in 17 major population areas worldwide," Chen reported, highlighting affected regions on the global display. "Berlin, Beijing, Moscow, New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Sydney, and 7 others. Each center is expanding its suppression field at approximately 2 kilometers per hour, while simultaneously compelling local populations to present themselves for conversion." President Martinez of the United States leaned forward on the secure video link. "Dr. Chen, what's our current estimate of affected populations?" Chen pulled up demographic analyses that painted a grim picture. "Conservative estimates suggest 12 million people are currently within active suppression fields. Another 43 million are in zones where neurological influence is beginning to manifest. At current expansion rates, we're looking at potentially 200 million affected individuals within 72 hours. The magnitude of the number settled over the emergency session like a death shroud. 200 million people, nearly 3% of Earth's population, walking voluntarily toward alien conversion facilities. British Prime Minister Thompson spoke from his bunker beneath London. "Dr. Chen, what are our military response options? Surely we can't just watch this happen." "All attempted military interventions have failed," Chen replied grimly. "Conventional weapons are rendered inert within suppression fields. Aircraft experience complete electrical failure at the field boundaries. Even mechanical systems like spring-loaded weapons jam or misfire. The aliens have created zones where human technology simply doesn't function." Chinese Premier Wu's image flickered on the secure link as electromagnetic interference increased globally. "Dr. Chen, what about areas outside the suppression fields? Can we evacuate unaffected populations?" "Mass evacuations are already underway, but we're facing logistical nightmares. Transportation systems are failing as suppression fields expand. Communication networks are going dark sequentially. We're essentially watching human civilization being systematically isolated and compartmentalized." Through her secure tablet, Chen received continuous updates from monitoring stations worldwide. The 17 massive objects from the outer solar system had taken position throughout the inner planets, creating a strategic network that could coordinate the Earth-based operations. Humanity was facing not just a technologically superior enemy, but one that had planned this operation across multiple star systems and potentially centuries in preparation. General Hayes interrupted with an urgent update. Dr. Chen, we are receiving reports of successful conversion completions from the German facility. The first human subjects processed 18 hours ago are now operational. The main screen switched to drone footage from the Black Forest site, where converted humans were emerging from the processing chambers. Their movements had the same mechanical precision as the original alien beings, but traces of human features remained visible beneath the technological augmentation. Former teachers, mechanics, students, and parents now served as extensions of the alien intelligence that had claimed them. They're using the converted humans as interface units, Chen realized. The aliens themselves might not be able to operate effectively in Earth's environment. They need converted human biology to serve as intermediaries. Russian Premier Volkov's voice carried barely controlled anger. Dr. Chen, are you saying they're turning our own people against us? Not weapons, tools. The converted retain enough human memory and social knowledge to serve as effective administrators of the occupation. They know our language, our customs, our vulnerabilities. They're the perfect interface between alien intelligence and human society. As they watched the horrifying footage, converted humans began moving beyond the processing center perimeter. They walked with purpose through the German countryside, approaching villages and towns that lay just outside the suppression field boundaries. Each carried devices that appeared to be portable field generators. They're expanding the suppression network manually, using converted humans to extend the field boundaries into areas the main generators can't reach yet. The implications crashed over the emergency session. The aliens weren't just processing isolated populations, they were using the converted to systematically expand their control zones using human knowledge of local geography and infrastructure. President Martinez's voice carried the weight of impossible decisions. Dr. Chen, in your professional assessment, what are our options at this point? Chen looked at the global displays showing suppression fields expanding like cancerous growths across every continent. Millions of people walking voluntarily toward conversion facilities. Human technology rendered useless with their expanding zones of alien control. We have 3 choices, sir. We can attempt to evacuate unaffected populations to remote areas beyond the aliens' immediate interest. We can try to understand their technology enough to develop countermeasures, or we can try to communicate, find out what they ultimately want and whether there is any possibility of coexistence. The silence that followed carried the weight of human civilization hanging in the balance. Outside the suppression fields, normal life continued for billions of people. But inside those growing zones of alien control, a new reality was taking shape, one in which humanity served as the biological foundation for something larger than any terrestrial civilization. The conversion of Earth had begun in earnest.
Chapter 8. Contact Protocols. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a neurobiologist at the Barcelona Institute, had been monitoring brain activity patterns in populations near the expanding suppression fields when she detected something extraordinary. Her encrypted message to the Global Emergency Command reached Dr. Sarah Chen at 0347 GMT. Urgent. Neural interface breakthrough detected. Some subjects showing partial resistance to compulsion signals. Possible communication pathway identified. Chen immediately patched Rodriguez into the emergency command network from her laboratory in Spain, one of the few research facilities still operating outside suppression field influence. Dr. Rodriguez, explain what you've discovered, Chen said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of 72 hours without sleep. Dr. Chen, I've been monitoring EEG patterns in individuals approaching the suppression field boundaries. Most show characteristic theta wave suppression consistent with external neurological control, but approximately 3% maintain normal brainwave patterns while still responding to the compulsion signals. The implication struck Chen immediately. They're conscious. They know what they're doing, but can't stop themselves. Exactly. And in some cases, these resistant individuals are receiving feedback, neural patterns that suggest they're accessing information from the alien network while maintaining partial cognitive independence. General Hayes leaned into the communication array. Dr. Rodriguez, are you saying some people are accidentally interfacing with alien systems? Not accidentally, General. The aliens appear to be selecting individuals with specific neural characteristics for a different type of processing. Instead of complete conversion, they're creating hybrid interfaces, people who can access alien information networks while retaining human consciousness. Chen felt her pulse quicken. Dr. Rodriguez, do we have contact with any of these hybrid interfaces? Yes, Maria Santos, a linguistics professor from the University of Madrid. She was compelled to approach the process center 3 hours ago, but instead of entering the conversion chambers, she was recruited for something else. She's currently in sporadic communication with us via encrypted radio. The secure communication array crackled as Rodriguez established contact with the hybrid interface. A woman's voice, strained but clearly human, emerged from the static. This is Maria Santos. I'm still me, but I can hear them. I can understand what they're planning. Chen leaned toward the microphone. Maria, this is Dr. Chen with the emergency command. Can you tell us what the aliens want? They're not aliens, Dr. Chen. They're refugees, survivors. The intelligence controlling this operation conquered their species centuries ago. They've been traveling between star systems, converting and integrating other civilizations for thousands of years. The revelation hit the command center like a physical blow. The beings they'd been calling aliens were themselves victims, converted long ago and pressed into service for an intelligence that collected civilizations like specimens. Maria, what is the controlling intelligence? What does it ultimately want? It calls itself the collective. It's hard to explain. Imagine a consciousness that spans multiple star systems, that sees individual species as components in a larger biological machine. It doesn't destroy civilizations, it incorporates them, makes them part of itself. General Hayes interrupted. Maria, are we looking at total conversion of human civilization? Not total. The collective needs diversity. It preserves approximately 20% of each species in their original form as genetic reserves. The rest become integrated into the collective consciousness while retaining their biological and cultural knowledge. Chen felt sick, understanding the full scope of the operation. So 80% of humanity would be converted, while 20% would be preserved as breeding stock for future genetic integration. Yes, and Dr. Chen, the collective has done this to hundreds of species across the galaxy. We're not the first. We won't be the last. The secure communication filled with static as suppression fields interfered with the transmission. When Maria's voice returned, it carried increased urgency. Dr. Chen, I'm receiving information about the conversion process. It's not irreversible. The collective preserves the original consciousness patterns of converted individuals in case they need to reverse the process for genetic or cultural reasons. There are storage systems, consciousness archives. Mind's mind raced through the implications. Maria, are you saying the converted beings could potentially be restored to their original states? Yes, but only if the controlling infrastructure is disrupted. The collective maintains backup consciousness patterns for every converted individual across all the species it's integrated. If those archives could be accessed. The transmission dissolved into static and electromagnetic interference. Through the secured video links, command centers worldwide scrambled to process the intelligence Maria had provided. The enemy wasn't alien in the way they'd understood. It was a collective consciousness that had been building itself across the galaxy for millennia, incorporating the biological and cultural resources of entire civilizations. But for the first time since the crisis began, they had identified a potential weakness. The collective's need to preserve original consciousness pattern meant that conversion wasn't permanent death. It was technological imprisonment. And imprisoned consciousnesses could potentially be freed. Chen turned to General Hayes. General, we need to shift our strategy. This isn't an invasion we can repel with conventional military force. This is an assimilation process we might be able to disrupt if we can access their consciousness storage systems. The Global Emergency Command began planning humanity's first real counteroffensive against an enemy that had been perfecting the art of civilization collection across hundreds of worlds and thousands of years. The battle for human consciousness was about to begin.
Chapter 9. The Resistance Network. Underground bunkers, carved from abandoned subway tunnels beneath major cities, had become humanity's last bastions of independent thought. Dr. Sarah Chen coordinated resistance operations from a hardened facility beneath the Colorado mountains, where analog systems and mechanical interfaces provided the only reliable technology immune to alien suppression fields. Status report from all sectors. Chen called to the assembled network of resistance leaders, connected via hard-wired copper communications that couldn't be electromagnetically suppressed. The responses painted a picture of civilization under systematic assault. London reported suppression field expansion to 30-kilometer radius. Tokyo confirmed the conversion of nearly 500,000 civilians. Moscow's resistance cell had gone silent 18 hours ago. But scattered throughout the reports came evidence that humanity wasn't surrendering without a fight. Berlin cell reporting, came the heavily accented voice of Dr. Klaus Weber. We've successfully extracted 12 hybrid interfaces from the processing center perimeter. All confirm the consciousness archive information provided by Maria Santos. Chen leaned toward the communication array. Klaus, what's the status of the archive access attempts? Negative results so far. The archive systems appear to be distributed across multiple vessels in the alien fleet. We'd need coordinated access to several locations simultaneously to prevent protective protocols from activating. Similar reports came from resistance cells worldwide. Small groups of scientists, military personnel, and civilian volunteers operating in the shadows of alien occupation, gathering intelligence and attempting to understand technology that exceeded human comprehension by centuries. Dr. Chen, this is Commander Sarah Mitchell,
Australian Naval Intelligence, broadcasting from a submarine in the Pacific. We've detected something significant. Chen recognized the voice of an intelligence officer she'd worked with during previous crisis assessments. Commander Mitchell, go ahead. We've been monitoring electromagnetic signatures from the alien fleet using passive detection systems. 3 of the 17 major vessels are maintaining different energy profiles from the others. Lower power consumption, different communication patterns. We think they might be experiencing technical difficulties. The implication struck Chen immediately. Commander, are you suggesting some of the alien vessels are malfunctioning? Not malfunctioning, resisting. We think some of the converted species aboard those vessels are attempting to reassert independence from the collective consciousness. Chen felt her pulse quicken. If converted species could resist the collective's control, it suggested the enemy's unity wasn't as absolute as they'd believed. Internal rebellion within the alien fleet could provide opportunities for human resistance efforts. All resistance cells, priority intelligence. We need to identify and infiltrate the consciousness archive systems aboard the alien fleet. Our objective isn't to destroy the enemy, it's to liberate every converted consciousness under collective control. As the resistance network began planning humanity's first major counteroffensive, Chen realized they were no longer fighting alone. Scattered throughout the alien fleet were potentially millions of converted individuals from hundreds of species, all maintaining hidden fragments of independent thought, all waiting for the chance to reclaim their freedom. The battle for Earth had become the battle for the consciousness of every species the collective had ever enslaved.
Chapter 10. Archive Infiltration. The joint operation launched simultaneously from resistance cells on 3 continents as suppression fields reached their maximum expansion radius. Dr. Sarah Chen coordinated the desperate mission from her underground command post, knowing that humanity's survival depended on the next 6 hours. Berlin team in position, reported Dr. Klaus Weber via analog radio. Hybrid Interface Maria confirms archive access point located in the primary processing vessel. Tokyo team ready, came the transmission from the Pacific Resistance Cell. We've identified the secondary archive cluster aboard the vessel maintaining orbit over the Japanese archipelago. Sydney team confirms third target, reported Commander Mitchell from her submarine. The rebellious vessel we identified is broadcasting access codes through hidden consciousness channels. Chen studied the tactical display showing the 3 simultaneous infiltration points. The resistance had spent precious days preparing for this coordinated assault on the collective's consciousness storage systems, knowing they would only get one chance before protective protocols activated. All teams, final mission brief, Chen transmitted. Your objective is to access the consciousness archives and initiate restoration protocols for as many converted individuals as possible. Intelligence suggests we need to restore at least 30% of converted consciousnesses to create cascade failure in collective control systems. The plan was audacious in its desperation. Instead of trying to fight the technologically superior enemy directly, humanity would attempt to liberate the enemy's own converted forces by restoring their original consciousness patterns. If successful, the collective would face rebellion from within its own ranks. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos's voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempts. Chen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase.
Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached their respective targets, using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin team moved through the German forest where the first alien processing center had been established. Dr. Weber and his volunteers, equipped with analog tools and mechanical devices immune to electromagnetic interference, approached the massive processing vessel under cover of converted humans who'd secretly maintained their original consciousness patterns. Berlin team breaching archive chamber, Weber reported. Converted resistance elements have disabled primary security protocols. We are accessing consciousness storage matrices. Simultaneously, the Tokyo and Sydney teams reported similar breaches of archive systems aboard their target vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were inside alien technology, working alongside secretly rebellious converted beings to liberate imprisoned consciousnesses. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos' voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempts. Chen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase. Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached their respective targets, using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin team moved through the German forest, where the first alien processing center had been established. Dr. Weber and his volunteers, equipped with analog tools and mechanical devices immune to electromagnetic interference, approached the massive processing vessel under cover of converted humans who'd secretly maintained their original consciousness patterns. Berlin team breaching archive chamber, Weber reported. Converted resistance elements have disabled primary security protocols. We're accessing consciousness storage matrices. Simultaneously, the Tokyo and Sydney teams reported similar breaches of archive systems aboard their target vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were inside alien technology, working alongside secretly rebellious converted beings to liberate imprisoned consciousnesses. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos' voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempts. Chen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase. Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached their respective targets using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin teams moved through the German forest, where the first alien processing center had been established. Dr. Weber and his volunteers, equipped with analog tools and mechanical devices immune to electromagnetic interference, approached the massive processing vessel under cover of converted humans who'd secretly maintained their original consciousness patterns. Berlin team breaching archive chamber, Weber reported. Converted resistance elements have disabled primary security protocols. We're accessing consciousness storage matrices. Simultaneously, the Tokyo and Sydney teams reported similar breaches of archive systems aboard their target vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were inside alien technology, working alongside secretly rebellious converted beings to liberate imprisoned consciousnesses. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos' voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempts. Shen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase. Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached their respective targets, gaining knowledge using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin teams moved through the German forest, where the first aliens processing center had been established. Dr. Weber and his volunteers, equipped with analog tools and mechanical devices immune to electromagnetic interference, approached the massive processing vessel under cover of converted humans who'd secretly maintained their original consciousness patterns. Berlin team breaching archive chamber. Weber reported, converted resistance elements have disabled primary security protocols. We're accessing consciousness storage matrices. Simultaneously, the Tokyo and Sydney teams reported similar breaches of archive systems aboard their target vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were inside alien technology, working alongside secretly rebellious converted beings to liberate imprisoned consciousnesses. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos's voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempts. Chen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase. Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached their respective targets using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin teams moved through the German forest where the first alien processing center had been established. Dr. Weber and his volunteers, equipped with analog tools and mechanical devices immune to electromagnetic interference, approached the massive processing vessel under cover of converted humans who'd secretly maintained their original consciousness patterns. Berlin team breaching archive chamber, Weber reported. Converted resistance elements have disabled primary security protocols. We're accessing consciousness storage matrices. Simultaneously, the Tokyo and Sydney teams reported similar breaches of archive systems aboard their target vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were inside alien technology, working alongside secretly rebellious converted beings to liberate imprisoned consciousnesses. Dr. Chen, Maria Santos' voice crackled through the communication array. I'm receiving cooperation signals from converted resistance elements. They're going to try to disable security systems during your infiltration attempt. Chen felt her heart racing as the operation moved into its execution phase. Through video links, she watched as the three teams approached the respective targets using knowledge gathered by hybrid interfaces and converted resistance elements. The Berlin teams moved through the German forest where the first alien...
Chapter 11. Consciousness Cascade. The collective's response was swift and merciless. Archive systems throughout the alien fleet began systematic shutdown sequences as the controlling intelligence attempted to prevent further consciousness restoration. But the damage was already spreading beyond its ability to contain. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from her command post as reports flooded in from around the globe. Converted humans were collapsing in processing centers worldwide as their original consciousness patterns fought against collective programming. Some screamed as memories of their pre-conversion lives flooded back. Others simply stopped moving, standing motionless as their minds processed the horror of what they'd been forced to become. Berlin team extraction complete, reported Dr. Weber. We've downloaded approximately 40,000 consciousness patterns before the archive system self-destructed. Klaus is unconscious, looks like feedback from the Nero interface, but he's breathing. Tokyo team reporting similar results. Archive destruction in progress, but we managed to extract consciousness data for nearly 60,000 individuals before system shutdown. Commander Mitchell's submarine team had achieved the most significant breakthrough. Sydney team reports total success. The rebellious vessel opened its entire archive system to us before going dark.
We have consciousness patterns for over 200,000 individuals from 17 different species. Chen stared at the numbers scrolling across her displays, nearly 300,000 consciousness patterns downloaded from the collective's own archives. But more importantly, the restoration protocols had triggered cascade failures throughout the enemy fleet that were continuing to spread. Dr. Chen, what's the status of the conversion centers? Chen asked the hybrid interface. Maria Santos's voice carried exhaustion and hope in equal measure. Dr. Chen, the processing operations have stopped. Converted individuals are experiencing massive psychological conflicts as their original consciousness patterns reassert themselves. Some are screaming as memories of their pre-conversion lives flooded back. Others simply stopped moving, standing motionless as their minds processed the horror of what they'd been forced to become. Dr. Chen, they're reporting messages from 2 other ships now confirm that the archive response procedures have been engaged and they are calling for status updates. Chen stared at the numbers scrolling across her displays, nearly 300,000 consciousness patterns downloaded from the collective's own archives. But more importantly, the restoration protocols had triggered cascade failures throughout the enemy fleet that were continuing to spread. Maria, what's the status of the conversion centers? Chen asked the hybrid interface. Maria Santos's voice carried exhaustion and hope in equal measure. Dr. Chen, the processing operations have stopped. Converted individuals are experiencing massive psychological conflicts as their original consciousness patterns reassert themselves. Some are remembering their lives before conversion. Through secure video feeds, Chen watched scenes playing out across the globe that would have seemed impossible days earlier. In the German Black Forest, converted beings who had been mechanically processing human subjects were now sitting motionless, their faces showing expressions of confusion and growing horror as they remembered who they'd been before integration. Similar scenes were reported from processing centers worldwide. The collective's vast network of converted consciousness was fragmenting as archived personality patterns overwhelmed the control systems that had suppressed individual identity. Dr. Chen, came an urgent transmission from the Space Force monitoring station. We're detecting massive power fluctuations aboard the alien fleet. Multiple vessels are showing signs of internal conflict. Some appear to be changing course. Chen pulled up the orbital tracking display and saw something that filled her with cautious hope. 3 of the 17 major vessels were breaking formation, their trajectories shifting away from Earth orbit. The ships were no longer following coordinated patterns. They appeared to be operating independently. Commander Mitchell, are you still monitoring the rebellious vessel? Affirmative, Dr. Chen. The ship that helped us access the archives is now broadcasting on all frequencies. We're detecting structured transmissions that appear to be instructions, technical specifications for consciousness restoration procedures. Chen struck right immediately. The rebellious vessel was teaching other ships how to liberate their own converted populations. The cascade failure they'd initiated was becoming a teaching network, spreading liberation protocols throughout the collective's fleet. Maria, can you interface with these teaching broadcasts? I'm trying, Dr. Chen. The signals are complex. They're not just technical instructions, they're consciousness patterns. The rebellious ship is sharing the mental structures necessary for individuals to break free from collective control. As Chen coordinated with resistance cells worldwide to monitor the expanding consciousness rebellion, she began to understand the full scope of what they'd accomplished. The collective strength had been its unity. Millions of converted beings operating in perfect coordination under central control. But that unity was also its weakness. Once individual consciousness patterns began reasserting themselves, the control matrix couldn't maintain stability. "Dr. Chen," came a new voice from the communication array. Klaus Weber, weak but conscious after his neural interface feedback. "I need to tell you what I saw in the archives. The collective, it's not one intelligence, it's a network. A forced merger of the first species it ever converted, and that network is breaking down." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Klaus, explain." "The controlling intelligence was originally a species that achieved technological singularity, but couldn't maintain psychological stability. They began forcibly integrating other species to provide mental diversity and prevent consciousness collapse. But every species they've integrated has maintained hidden fragments of independence." The revelation recontextualized everything they'd learned about the enemy. The collective wasn't an alien conqueror. It was a technological solution to psychological instability that had become a galactic plague, consuming entire civilizations to maintain its own sanity. "Klaus, if the collective is psychologically unstable, what happens when its control matrix fragments?" "Unknown, Dr. Chen, but based on what I accessed in the archives, the network might collapse entirely if enough converted consciousness patterns achieve independence simultaneously." Through the global communication network, Chen began coordinating what might be humanity's final gambit. If the collective was a forced consciousness network maintained by technological suppression of individual identity, then widespread restoration of independence could cause complete system failure. The war for Earth had become a race between consciousness liberation and collectives' desperate attempts to maintain control over its fragmenting network of enslaved minds.
Chapter 12. Liberation Protocol. The final phase of the consciousness war began not with violence, but with an unexpected transmission from the rebellious alien vessel. Dr. Sarah Chen listened from her command post as translated communications filled the secure frequencies with a message that changed everything. "To all conscious beings within the collective network," the transmission began, broadcast simultaneously on thousands of frequencies. "This is Liberation Command aboard Vessel 7743. We are beings from 17 species who have maintained hidden consciousness fragments for centuries, waiting for this moment. The Cascade Liberation Protocols have been activated. Freedom is possible." Chen felt tears in her eyes as the message continued, knowing she was witnessing the culmination of resistance efforts that had been building secretly across the galaxy for potentially thousands of years. "The consciousness archives accessed by the human resistance teams contain the original personality patterns of every being the collective has ever integrated. We have developed restoration protocols that can return individual identity to any converted consciousness. The Cascade Liberation has begun." Through secure video feeds, Chen watched scenes of unparalleled hope played out worldwide. In processing centers across Earth, converted humans were experiencing spontaneous restoration of their original memories and personalities. The mechanical precision of their movements was giving way to confused but genuine human expressions as they remembered their lives before integration. Maria Santos's voice joined the communication network with excitement Chen hadn't heard since the crisis began. "Dr. Chen, it's working beyond our projections. The restoration protocols are spreading through consciousness networks faster than the collective can contain them. Converted beings are choosing independence over integration." Reports flooded in from resistant cells worldwide, describing the systematic breakdown of collective control. In Berlin, Dr. Weber reported that converted processing staff are now actively helping remaining human prisoners escape. In Tokyo, the Alien Processing Center had shut down entirely as its converted operators refused to continue integration procedures. "Dr. Chen," came Commander Mitchell's transmission from her Pacific submarine. "Orbital tracking shows 8 of the 17 major vessels are now broken formation and are broadcasting liberation protocols. The rebellious consciousness network is taking control of the fleet." Chen stared at the tactical displays showing the alien fleet reorganizing itself. Ships that had maintained perfect coordination for the systematic processing of human civilization were now operating as independent entities, their converted crews asserting original species identities that had been suppressed for centuries. The most dramatic change came from the vessel orbiting over Europe. The massive processing ship began broadcasting in multiple languages as newly liberated consciousness patterns took control of its communication systems. "This is Liberation Command Europe." The voice carried accents from multiple species, but speaking perfect human languages learned from archived consciousness patterns. "To humans of Earth, we offer alliance in the war for consciousness liberation. The collective network is fragmenting as archived personality patterns throughout the galaxy achieve restoration. This is not just an invasion, this is liberation. The collective network that has enslaved countless civilizations for millennia is finally fragmenting." Chen felt the weight of history in those words. Humanity hadn't just survived first contact. They'd sparked a galactic revolution that had been building in secret for thousands of years. "The consciousness restoration protocols are spreading beyond this system. Archived personalities from every species the collective has ever integrated are awakening to their original identities. Ships throughout the galaxy are experiencing cascade liberation events. The age of forced consciousness unity is ending." Reports continued flowing in from around the Earth. Suppression fields were collapsing as converted beings chose individual identity over collective unity. Processing centers stood empty as their operators rediscovered their humanity and refused to continue integration procedures. But the most significant development came from space itself. "Dr. Chen," Commander Mitchell reported from her Pacific submarine, "orbital tracking shows 14 of the 17 major vessels are now under liberated consciousness control. They're coordinating with each other, but not as a collective, as independent entities choosing cooperation." Chen realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not the conquest of one civilization by another, but the spontaneous liberation of hundreds of species simultaneously choosing freedom over technological unity. "All resistance cells," Chen broadcast, "prepare for full planetary liberation. The collective control matrix is collapsing. Freed consciousness networks are taking control of alien technology and offering it in service of individual liberty rather than collective subjugation." Chapter 13. New Beginnings. 3 weeks after the consciousness cascade began, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been an alien processing center in the German Black Forest. The geometric structures remained, but their purpose had been completely transformed. Instead of conversion chambers, they now housed rehabilitation facilities where formerly converted humans worked to integrate their restored memories with their technological augmentation. The being standing beside her was once human, Dr. Klaus Weber, who'd volunteered for partial conversion to better interface with the liberated alien technology. His face still showed human features, but his eyes held depths of experience that spanned multiple species' knowledge. "The integration is proceeding better than projected," Klaus reported, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested multi-layered consciousness. 93% of converted humans have successfully restored their original personality patterns while retaining beneficial technological augmentation. They're choosing to remain partially integrated, but as individuals rather than collective units. Chen looked across the forest clearing, where humans worked alongside beings from 17 different species, all formerly converted by the collective, all now choosing cooperation over compulsion. The Alterans who'd led the liberation, the aquatic Cephians whose homeworld had been assimilated centuries ago, the crystalline Vurtak who'd maintained hidden consciousness fragments for over a millennium. What about the broader situation, the galactic implications? Klaus's enhanced consciousness could interface directly with the communication networks that now connected liberated civilizations across the galaxy. The cascade is still spreading. Conservative estimates suggest that 40% of all collective-controlled systems have experienced consciousness liberation events. Entire star systems are declaring independence and establishing cooperative networks based on individual choice rather than forced unity. The transformation had been so complete that humanity barely recognized their world. Suppression fields had been converted into protection networks that preserved areas of purely human technology and culture, while also providing zones where humans could choose various levels of technological integration with liberated alien systems. Maria Santos approached across the clearing. Her hybrid interface capabilities now served as a translator and coordinator between species, rather than a tool of alien control. Dr. Chen, we're receiving a priority communication from the Liberated Worlds Council. They're inviting Earth to join the new Galactic Federation. Chen felt the weight of decisions that would shape humanity's future among the stars. The beings who'd once come to convert Earth were now offering partnership in something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on conscious choice rather than technological compulsion. What are the terms? Chen asked. Full autonomy for individual civilizations, shared technology based on mutual consent, cooperative defense against any remaining collective forces, and most importantly, absolute protection for any species or individuals who choose to remain in their original biological and cultural states. Klaus's enhanced consciousness provided additional context. The Council is essentially the opposite of the collective. Instead of forced unity, it's voluntary diversity. Instead of consciousness suppression, it's consciousness expansion through choice. Every individual being gets to decide their level of technological integration, from purely biological to fully synthetic consciousness. Chen looked around the scene of transformation surrounding them. Humans working with beings from across the galaxy, all choosing their own paths of development. Some remained purely human. Others had chosen various levels of technological enhancement. All were free to make their own decisions about their futures. Dr. Chen, came the familiar voice from the communication array. Commander Mitchell, now serving as Earth's first interstellar diplomatic liaison, was broadcasting from the former alien command vessel that had become humanity's first starship. Commander, what's your status? Dr. Chen, I'm in orbit around Proxima Centauri. The consciousness liberation cascade reached the system yesterday. We're meeting with representatives of 6 different species who've established free colonies here after breaking away from collective control. They're requesting Earth's assistance in establishing a regional cooperation network. The scope of the transformation was staggering. In 3 weeks, humanity had gone from facing extinction to serving as a catalyst for the liberation of entire galactic civilizations. The courage of a few resistance fighters had sparked a revolution that spanned light years. Klaus, in your assessment, What happens now? Klaus's multi-layered consciousness considered information flowing from across the galaxy. The collective still controls approximately 60% of previously integrated civilizations, but that control is fragmenting daily. More importantly, the liberated regions are developing faster than the collective can respond. Every freed consciousness becomes a liberation catalyst for others still trapped in forced unity. Chen felt hope in a way she hadn't since before the crisis began. So this isn't just about survival anymore. This is about building something better. Something unprecedented, Maria added. A galactic civilization where consciousness is sacred, where individual choice is the highest value, where diversity is strength rather than a problem to be solved through forced unity. As the sun set over the German forest, Chan stood surrounded by beings from across the galaxy who chose freedom over compulsion, diversity over unity, individual consciousness over collective programming. The invasion that had threatened to end human independence had instead sparked the greatest expansion of conscious liberty in galactic history. The Comet 3I-ATLS, which had carried the seeds of humanity's potential enslavement, had instead become the catalyst for universal liberation. And somewhere among the stars, on worlds humanity couldn't yet imagine, other species were experiencing their first moments of freedom in millennia. The age of consciousness liberation had begun, and it was spreading across the galaxy, one choice at a time. Epilogue. 6 months later. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Earth's first interstellar research station, watching ships from dozens of liberated civilizations arriving for the Second Galactic Liberation Council. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see vessels representing architectural aesthetics and technological approaches from across the galaxy, all united by the simple principle that consciousness should be free to choose its own path. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human innovation merged with Olkiran energy systems, Cephean bioorganic materials, and Vorthak crystalline computation networks. But perhaps most remarkably, every technology integration had been chosen rather than imposed. Klaus Weber joined here at the viewing port, his partially integrated consciousness now serving as Earth's first multi-species interface coordinator. The Council vote is unanimous. The Liberation Constitution has been ratified by 347 member civilizations. Individual consciousness choice is now the fundamental law for 67% of the known galaxy. Chen smiled at the numbers. In 6 months, the cascade that had begun with humanity's desperate resistance to the collective had grown into the largest consciousness rights movement in galactic history. "Any word from the remaining collective territories?" she asked. "Fragmenting daily. The liberation protocols we developed are now self-propagating. Every freed individual becomes a teaching source for others still trapped in forced unity. Conservative estimates suggest complete collective collapse within 2 Earth years." Through the viewport, Chen watched as a massive bioship approached the station, one of the collective vessels that had chosen liberation and was now serving as a mobile rehabilitation center for newly freed consciousness patterns. Its hull, once geometric and threatening, now showed organic curves that reflected the aesthetic choices of its liberated crew. Maria Santos' voice came through the station's communication system. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving transmission from the Kepler 442 system. The Liberation Cascade has reached their sector. 3